Hello there and welcome to another Coffee with Colin, and thank you for joining me. Based on the weather behind me here, you'll be forgiven for not knowing that we've just come through a very stormy patch here in Ireland. Very stormy weather all week. And one of the evenings during the week, it was raining very heavily. It was dark, naturally maybe 8:30 in the evening. And I was driving on one of our local motorways here, and I was in the outer lane. I have a tendency, unfortunately, to see speed limits as targets, and so I tend to go and drive at the speed limit, which is 120 kilometers an hour. I also tend to find myself in the outer lane. It just seems to be my natural place to be, and I knew where I was headed, so I was heading way off up the road. And it was quite rainy, it was very dark, and I was aware of all of the traffic coming towards me on the opposite side of the motorway and the glaring of their lights in the raindrops on the windscreen. So it was a little bit disconcerting. Anyway, I'm heading off up the road, and the next thing I notice in the distance and coming to me very quickly was a car. But this car was in the outer lane, in this fast lane, on the wrong side of the motorway heading towards me. I'm travelling at 120 kilometers an hour towards a non-coming car on the wrong side of the road. Panic. So of course, naturally I hit the brakes and I veered into my left to avoid collision. Stuck on my hazards to warn the people coming behind me. And of course the cars in front of me had seen what was going on, and they had begun to move into the hard shoulder and so on. So you can imagine the scene. But very quickly, because the closing speed between my 120 kilometers an hour and I assume your man's 120 kilometers an hour was 240 kilometers an hour, was the closing speed of our two vehicles in direct collision course. I pulled in and he goes past me, and at this stage he's beginning to realise something has gone wrong. I'm hooting my horn to warn him, I'm beckoning him, and I'm watching in my rear view mirror as the cars behind me also take evasive action and move in out of his way. And then I begin to see his brake lights come on, and he slows down and he clearly realises something's gone wrong, and thankfully he turns around and follows the correct course, the correct direction. So let's be thankful that we're all having coffee this morning together and you're not having coffee on your own. So a couple of things struck me from that particular incident on the motorway. Number one, storms in life are inevitable. Now, we're going to have storms in our life, whether we like it or not. They're just a fact of life. And we need to sort of make friends with that fact that at some point in our future, perhaps even now, you're going through something that's rather stormy and you prefer not to be. But the second thing we got to remember is that storms will come to an end. Look at the weather behind me. So that storm has abated. There's another one somewhere out there on the horizon. But for now, we're in a quiet patch, a calm patch. And the second thing that struck me was that we're not in charge of what other people do. So we're going to have storms in our life for sure. We're also going to come across incidents like what happened on the motorway in our lives, where somebody else makes a mistake or perhaps deliberately gets in our way to thwart our progress. But we shouldn't allow it to happen. Of course, we've got to take evasive action at times, as I did on the motorway. Of course, we've got to slow down at times. Perhaps we've got to stop at times. But if we do so, we should only be stopping to regroup so that we can go forward again. We should not be stopping just to give up on our dreams because somebody else deliberately or unintentionally got in our way. And the third thing we got to remember is that this too will pass. The storm will abate. The person or the incident or the issue in front of us will at some point be behind us. I heard a wonderful phrase recently: everything eventually becomes a sentence. Everything eventually becomes a sentence. That incident on the motorway has now become a sentence. I nearly crashed into a guy head on in the fast lane because he was going the wrong way. There's a sentence. But it's become a sentence. Everything eventually becomes a sentence. Everything eventually will be in our past, and we'll be looking back at it from a different perspective. So if I may suggest a few things to remember from this week's Coffee with Colin. This too will pass. Everything becomes a sentence, so long as you keep moving forward. And thank you for joining me for this week's Coffee with Colin. Hope and trust you got something from it. Please come back next week. We'll share another coffee together and I'll ruminate on some other aspect of life and business. Between now and then, get some good coffee for sure, get some fresh air, get some R&R. When the time is right, and only when the time is right, get your head back in the game, get organised for the week ahead, make next week count, and I'll see you here this time next week for another Coffee with Colin. Sláinte. I really love great coffee. Talk to you soon. Bye for now.